Well, howdy there. You have stumbled your way into the MTG Thoughtcast and the Outlaws of Thunder Junction pre-con reviews. You're watching one of a four-part from our podcast episode, who you can find the links to in the description below, along with a playlist to all the other decks of this cycle from this set. We're real excited to have you here. Enjoy the show.
So Grand Larceny is the next deck we're going to talk about. Huge caveat before we get into talking about this at all. If Spell Table is your primary form of playing Commander, do not play this deck. Do not buy this deck. Don't play it. This is going to be a nearly impossible deck to play via Spell Table because it's a deck that's completely focused around playing your opponent's cards and them being face down until you cast them. So there's going to be a lot of like, hey, everyone close your eyes and flip the top card so that I can see it and then write it down and then do the whole thing. So with that caveat out of the way, this is Grand Larceny. It's a Sultai deck. The face commander is Gaunty Canny Acquisitor. 2 black, green, and a blue for a 5/5, obviously a legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue. Spells you cast but don't own cost 1 less to cast. And whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, look at the top card of that player's library, then exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So this obviously harkens back to the original Gaunty that you entered and you did that for one person. This one is significantly better because, like we talked about with the Outlaws, it benefits you for hitting multiple opponents. So if you hit one small creature that hits each opponent, you're going to flip the top card of each of their libraries, and then that just kind of becomes part of your hand. Very neat. Obviously, you can see what we're going to be doing with this deck is playing a bunch of little things that want to be getting in and are cheap and largely unblockable to be playing our opponent's cards. So it's going like, hey, I bet your deck's really cool. What if I played it instead? Prepare for the Rain of Salt playing this deck as well. People do not like when you play their cards against them. So lots of caveats here.
Maybe talk with your play group before you decide to buy this.
Oh, yeah.
Some people will absolutely hate you for this.
Quick thing to note as well, and this is, I think, a general feeling that we have. These precons don't feel like they've hit the bar for the bar that they've set for the last 3. Like, if you compare these precons to the Lost Caverns of Ixalan precons, it's night and day how different they're built, how different the reprint value is, how different the strategies are. These decks feel a bit more like old school precons, where they give you a couple different directions to go, but they kind of shuffle all the strategies together. So what I especially noticed about the Larceny deck is there's kind of 2 different things that it's trying to do. It's also trying to do this reanimator thing, and like playing out of your graveyard and playing out of opponents' graveyards.
It's on those Muldrotha colors. It was like reanimator. I can't help myself.
Well, it's like there's a which I'll be talking about this when we get to the cuts, but there's a Mimeoplasm in this deck for some reason, which it doesn't do anything that helps with the strategy of Gaunty. It's just kind of a good Sultai card that's in there. So I think with these, if you peel back some of the strategy and kind of start to inject a little bit more power into one of the strategies that it's doing, it's where I think these precons will start to shine. But overall, not impressed, and overall not feeling these. But let's talk about some of the new cards that were printed in Grand Larceny. So the alt commander is very neat. This is Felix 5 Boots. It's 2 black, green, and a blue for a legendary Ooze Rogue. That's a 5/4. It's so cool.
He's so neat.
Menace and Ward 2, and it panharmonicones when you hit a player. So if something dealing combat damage would cause a triggered ability to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So that works really well with Gaunty of the whenever one or more creatures hits. That's a triggered ability. So with Felix 5 Boots down, you're now going to get 2 cards exiled off the top of their library. That's like the obvious one. There's plenty of other effects, like I'm talking about reprints. There's an Orin Frostfang that's in this deck, which is whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Love that. That is the direction that I want this deck to go. Is just I'm trying to hit people. So not caring too much about Reanimator, not caring too much about good stuff. Couple other really cool new cards that's in this. We have the return of the Cipher mechanic, which is one of my personal favorites.
That is so cool.
So Arcane Heist is 2 blue for a sorcery that says that you can cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If it would be put into the graveyard exile instead. That alone to me is really good, but then it has Cipher on it, which is you essentially imprint that spell onto a creature, and whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, you get to recast that spell for free. So we're playing a lot of things in this deck that are either unblockable or largely unblockable. So something like a Slither Blade is in the deck. It's just a blue mana for a 1/2 that can't be blocked. So that works really well with Gonti. That works really well with Cipher. So it's like Voltron, but for spells. So that's Arcane Heist. Thieving Varmint is very neat as well. This is a cool little glue piece that I think a lot of people would overlook. But it's 1 and a black for a 2/1 Varmint with Death Touch and Lifelink that you can tap and pay a life and add 2 mana of any one color to cast spells you don't own. So this is going to just help you cast, like, let's say you flip something huge of your opponents and you don't have the ramp necessarily to get there, because spoiler, there's basically no ramp in this deck. It is very slim. There's practically no ramp. There's practically no interaction. There's 0 board wipes in this deck. It is all gas, no brakes. You're playing little creatures and you're hitting people. So, which, like, you know, you're going to be drawing your opponent's cards. So as long as your opponents are playing interaction and board wipes and things, you'll have some of it somewhere. So again, I disagree with a lot of the choices they made in.
It just feels like if you play this, you bring a knife to a gunfight and you just like know it.
Totally.
you have to know.
Yeah. What's cool is this deck will scale based on the power of your opponent's decks.
Sorry, that was a loud water bottle thing.
I love that it moved your camera too. So it'll scale. So if you're playing with other precons, you're going to be playing precon level cards. If you're playing power level 7 decks, you'll be playing a power level 7 deck too. So it's a bit of a chameleon. Last new card I want to talk about, Orochi Soul Reaver, is 5 and a black for a 5/4 Snake Ninja Rogue with Ninjutsu for 3 and a black. And whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and manifest the top card of that player's library. For all intents and purposes, this doubles your Gonti trigger, because you're going to... What I love about it is you don't need to attack with it. I love things that have that triggered ability on it, like Gonti, where you can set yourself up and then play it and it just puts gas on the flames.
Yeah, that's freaking dope.
Overall, I was talking about this before we started recording as well, but this kind of feels like they took a Satoru Umezawa deck and a Paco and Halden deck and just shuffled them together and said, here's your deck. It's really cool strategies. I do wish that they put a little bit more into the power level of it, just to keep up with the bar that they've set. There is some decent reprints in here. It's not great, I'm gonna be honest. Our highest reprint value for a non-land card is Mind's Dilation, which is a great card, and it's one that I know John loves.
It's in my top 10.
Yeah, it fits the theme of the deck really well, but also, like, this is a deck with no ramp in it. So playing a 7 it's 7 mana, isn't it? It's 7 mana enchantment that is, it's just gonna rot in your hand. Like
your ramp in here is cards like Hour Winder that puts Command Tower in your hand.
That's not even ramp. That's card draw. It's a land into your hand. I'm serious. Also, like, there's a Darksteel Ingot in this deck. What are they doing putting Darksteel Ingot an indestructible manolith? There's absolutely no reason to have, like, I could see if there was something that cared about your artifacts being indestructible or something, but like, it's just a bad card. Like, I don't really know what they were doing. Even like Prismatic Lens is not incredible. Like,
guys,
it's
I'll say
colorless
it.
ramp.
You guys can cut this if you want, but these are just reprint piles. That's what these decks are. That's why they feel like this.
It's
If you look
just
at them, they're
weird.
just reprint piles, dude.
Now, here's what I will say. They've pumped up the mana base of this one. This is one of the best mana bases they've ever printed in a precon. We have I've at least 2 of the colors of the Lorwyn filter lands, which are unbelievable. There's a Twilight Mire in here. There's they also have the Signet lands in here that were just printed in the Fallout precons. Yes, Flooded Grove. Like, the mana fixing and the mana base in this one, as compared to the Mardu deck, is really, really good. So Twilight Mire is the most expensive card in the deck as far as reprints go, and that's just sad. Like, our $6 reprint is a land.
It's a bummer.
Womp
Yeah, I was
womp.
looking at the total value on Moxfield of this one. It's 105, which is really low for like precons.
Yes. That
Those are
includes
way even the other ones in the
so
set
many
are
30 and 40 cent cards to get there.
This one's brutal.
So, you know, credit where it's due. They've pumped up a land base. If you want to play Sultai, this is a cheap way to get a really good land base for a Sultai deck. And the strategy of Gonti seems like it can be very cool. Let's talk about how to make it better. So, upgrades. This deck is asking for a Toski, Bearer of Secrets.
Yes.
Again, Orin Frostfang is going to be unbelievable in the deck to begin with. There's also an Edric Spymaster of Trest in the deck. So what you're trying to be doing is, like, even without Gonti on the board, I want to be able to hit all of my opponents and draw 3 cards off of it and just sit back and see what happens. So that when we play Gonti, it's going to just throw gas on the fire of, I'm going to draw 2 cards, one from the Edric, one from the Toski, and then flip a card off of the Gonti. All of a sudden, I'm looking and I have a stack of 9 cards that I can play from. Love Toski in here. This is insane that they didn't print this in this deck, but Scheming Symmetry is sick here. Scheming Symmetry is like a $5 card. It's 1 mana, you and your opponent each Vampiric Tutor, and put a card on top of your library.
Oh, dude, yes.
So, like,
I think you've played this on me, maybe?
I love Scheming Symmetry to begin with. But when you can, like, bait them into, like, Scheming Symmetry, go find something. I dare you. Put it on top of your library. I'm going to exile it and then get to play it. You're going to make them tutor for a basic land to put on top of their library. So Scheming Symmetry in this deck is just Vampiric Tutor. And
you still get your tutor either way,
Yeah,
so it ends up
exactly.
being win-win.
You still get to tutor for whatever you want, and you're going to fake somebody out. So it completely negates the downside of scheming Symmetry in this deck. Crazy good. This is a very, like, meat and potatoes upgrade, but I think there should be a Liquid Metal Torque in this deck. I think people are.
Dude,
What's
you are
that?
so on that card. I love it.
People are severely underplaying Liquid Metal Torque to begin with as a politics piece, but there's also, the deck comes with the Trigon Predator. So Trigon Predator, when it deals damage, you get to destroy a non-land artifact. Let me pull it up real quick so that I'm reading it correctly.
Artifact or enchantment that player controls.
Oh, yeah. So this helps with ramp because there's essentially none in the deck, but also, like, if you have your Trigon Predator down, it turns into Trigon Predator can hit and nuke whatever you want.
That's sick.
Love
That's actually
Liquid Metal
really
Torque.
cool.
And then if somebody casts a Reclamation Sage, you can politic with them and go, hey, I actually think you need to get rid of this creature. I'm just going to make it an artifact for you, and then you can blow it up. So people are underplaying Liquid Metal Torque. Another upgrade here. Shriekmaw. Crazy good in this deck. Again, this deck is lacking interaction. There is a Feed the Swarm in the deck. There's a Curse of the Swine for some reason in here. And that's roughly it.
There's a Curse of the Swine in the Quick Draw deck, too.
They really are pushing for Curse of the Swine, aren't they?
That's weird.
Anyway,
has that happened before?
What in the Ham Nation is happening? Yeah, there's the interaction package is pretty lacking in this deck. So what's cool about Shriekmaw is on 2, you can play it and nuke a non-artifact creature. If you get to 5, you can play it for 5 and the creature with fear sticks around, which fear is a very good ability when you're trying to be getting your creatures in. So it is not just a like, hey, play more interaction. This is thematic interaction, I would like to call it. So that's the Shriekmaw. Dude, Memory Lapse in this deck. Speaking of thematic interaction, Memory Lapse counters a spell and puts it on top of their library. That's for 1 and a blue. So, hey, sorry that you tried to cast that. It goes on top of your library. I'm going to hit you and then exile that card, and now I get to play it. Temporal Spring, though, is 1 green and a blue for a sorcery that puts a permanent on top of its opponent's library. So I'm happy with 3 mana to go, I'm going to get rid of any problem permanent, and then I get to cast it, and I get to be the problem. So the less that you can guess what's going to happen, because you're going to flip a lot of lands off of this. There's also like playing a Azusa Lost But Seeking would be really good in this deck, because you're going to be flipping so many cards, getting extra land drops, exploration, stuff like that. Again, though, this is just kind of a mid precon that I would not personally want to pump all of that money into. There are, again, like those cards are sort of better in a Paco and Halden deck. So it goes back and forth. I want to be playing creatures in this deck, and I want to be attacking. To me, this is just a combat deck that gets some extra value off of combat. So yeah, Temporal Spring was the last one I was going to talk about. For upgrades, there was a plethora of cuts. First one I want to cut is Smirking Spelljacker. Let me pull it up so I know what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, speaking of holding up 5 mana in a combat deck. So it's one of the new cards, but it's 4 and a blue for a 3/3 with flash and flying. And when it enters the battlefield, you exile a spell an opponent controls. And then when it attacks, if it has a card exiled with it, you get to cast the exiled card for free without paying its mana cost. I feel like this reads better than it actually is, because you're probably going to want to save yourself from like a board wipe, in which case you're not going to want to cast that anyway. So Smirking Spelljacker is very win more to me. Like if you're just using this to like get something of theirs for free in addition to all of the other free stuff you're getting from them, feels fine. Again, holding up 5 mana is not what I want to be doing. And like I want to be tapping out on my turn essentially. And then having to wait until it goes back to you to then attack with it, and then you get to cast the thing for free. It's just a little too conditional for my likes. So I would cut that.
Yeah, if I was forced to hold that 5 mana in something like this, I'd feel like Spell Swindle would probably have to be the better choice as well. You still counter the spell, and then it makes you treasures afterward that can then be used to spend those, right? Like to spend into the cards that you gonti.
Yeah, if your interaction is gonna be 5 CMC, should be something like that.
Better things to be doing at 5 CMC. Yeah. So the rest of these cuts, you will notice the theme here is this weird reanimator thing they're trying to do. So Diluvian Primordial is in no way supposed to be in this deck.
That stuck out like a sore thumb from like here. I was like, what? Diluvian
It like
Primordial?
sort of does what the deck is trying to do, but again, it's 7 mana? Like that is just so unbelievably expensive. Like I don't want to just upgrade the deck and put a bunch of ramp in it. I'd rather just cut the expensive spells and just like fly by the seat of my pants here. Like this doesn't feel like a deck that should need a ton of ramp if you're not playing things like Diluvian Primordial. So get rid of that. Oblivion Sower is the same way. Let me read it so I can see. 6 mana for a 5/8 Eldrazi. When you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library, and you get to put any number of land cards from their exile onto the battlefield. Is ramping what you want to be doing at 6 mana? Is that really what we need here? Is to play 6 mana to get more land?
Yikes,
nope.
Dude.
We're cutting that.
This is the kind of weird ramp you play in colorless decks.
Totally.
And, to get to like a 13 CMC Eldrazi.
If you're on theme, if you're blinking it, like sure, whatever. But that's not what we're doing here. We already talked about cutting the Mimeoplasm because why is that in here? We already talked about cutting Darksteel Ingot because why is that in here?
Dude, why isn't that like Relic of Legends or something?
Dude, it could totally be a Relic of Legends. in my mind, I'm cutting the Darksteel Ingot and adding Liquid Metal Torque. So
Fair,
that it
yeah.
still is ramping you at 1 mana cheaper and has some thematic value and some synergy in the deck.
Yes.
Darksteel Ingot has neither of those things, so it is out of my library. Last one is the Blade Griff prototype. Let me see this one here. Blade Griff prototype is 5 mana for a 3/2 with flying. That says when it deals combat damage to a player, destroy a non-land permanent of that player's choice. Destroy target non-land permanent of that player's choice that one of your opponents controls. So like you pay 5, wait a turn, hit them with your 3/2 with flying, and then they get to pick something on an opponent's board to destroy.
That's just going to make 2 people more angry at you.
I know. That's what I'm
dude.
okay. Yes. I'm so glad we were all on the same page with that. I'm like, what?
It's horrifying. This is a horrifying card. I don't want it anywhere. There is zero scenario where I want to be playing this.
I feel like one person thinks this is like funny, and then they do it. They play the game with this card, and then they realize, oh god, this is the
Totally. Yes, John's playing with it. The only card I'm fine with keeping in here that's kind of expensive is the Brain Stealer Dragon, because it does really good things. Like, alternatively, you can pay 7 mana for your 6/6 with flying that just has a trigger at the beginning of your end step. You exile the top card of each opponent's library, and then you get to cast them, like it Gaunties on your end step. And then when a non-land permanent an opponent owns enters the battlefield under your control, they lose life equal to its mana value.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a win. That's an actual win con.
This is a win condition, right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm fine with, we're probably not getting to 7 mana a ton or super quickly. What's nice is like, you will have lands in this deck because you're going to be exiling a ton of lands from what your opponents are doing, off of your opponent's libraries. So you're not going to really have to put a ton of card draw in this because Gaunty is so card draw-y. It's just weird card drawing off of what your opponents are doing. So overall, if I were to rate this deck out of 10, I would probably give it like a 5. I think like I could make this cool. There's cool things to be done with this deck. It's just none that I'm interested in at a $50 price tag. So,
Yeah.
And that unfortunately just sucks, because even the people I feel like that would be any bit interested to give this deck a whirl, the caveats at the beginning that you had mentioned, like, this is a deck you can't even play at all online, really.
No, totally.
Like, that's a huge hit for people. Like, it's not unrealistic to say that, you know, this is an age of Magic where people are doing things more digitally between spell tables and arenas and other clients that allow people to play over long distances with friends they can't or won't be able to see much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
I play 90% of the commander that I play on spell table these days. So this deck is just completely irrelevant to me.
And then the other one that you mentioned as well, that even if this is the deck that you are playing in person, you had mentioned people tend to not like having their stuff stolen. That's one of those things on that SALT scale, is like land destruction, theft, and stacks. Like, that's your 3 big hitters of no in Commander, and this whole deck is trying to promote it. So
totally.
does that
have
bring
PTSD from Elder Brain, Joseph?
I love elder braining people.
This
You
is
get to
just Elder
redraw
Brain
with
the
Elder
deck.
Brain, though. It doesn't even matter. I get to steal your stuff. You get stuff back instead.
yeah. So like, I don't know. It's like, who's the demographic of this deck? Is like,
I don't know, but what I do appreciate is, like, I feel like you touched on this as well, Jared, of it kind of being a pile of reprints, is if you just showed me the commander, I probably would pick 90% of these creatures to be in the deck. Like, they did a great job at picking, like, Thief of Sanity rules in here, Baleful Strix rules in here. Like, there are, Orin Frostfang, like, unbelievable card in this deck. So they've done what they can with the theme for it, I feel like.
Yeah, it is a functional deck. It does do something.
Yeah. It's
just
the
the thing
one that I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's just the thing that it does people don't like.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's, if I was interested in the deck, that's how I would upgrade it. But that's
exactly.
That's our Grand Larceny deck.